that we have today, we first had to grasp the science behind them. Science is built on good data. But did you know that bad data delayed one of the most significant inventions of the last 150 years? Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Final Reboot, the show for data-based marketers. The engine at the heart of every plane, train, and automobile was held up for decades, simply because of how records were kept. For millennia, we've known that combusting fossil fuels releases immense power. By the 1700s, scholars realized that if the gases trapped within those fuels could be ignited predictably in a chamber, they could create an internal combustion engine. To do that, however, you'd need to know the exact nature of each gas, the fuel composition, the air-to-fuel ratio, the necessary heat resistance. Without those specifics, the engine is just something that stays on the drawing board. That didn't stop scholars from trying, though. They studied gases under variable pressures and charted their results in massive tables. Robert Boyle recorded those values holding temperature constant, and Jacques Charles did the exact same thing holding volume constant. But despite all this data, we weren't getting any closer to a functional engine. Using tables to capture every possible variable is inefficient. What we need instead is a universal rule. It wasn't until well into the 1800s that physicist Emile compiled these century-old tables with some recent findings of Amadeo. By consolidating scattered sources, he realized they all pointed to a single law governing gas behavior. It had just been buried in the noise. This was the ideal gas law, and with it, engineers can finally calculate exactly what an engine needed, moving from theory to rapid production. Your marketing and sales data is likely in the same shape as those old tables. It may contain breakthrough ideas for growth, but they remain hidden as long as your data is disorganized. Just as it worked for the scientists of the Industrial Revolution, you got to get your data in order, and then the insights will follow. Today's guest will convince you that your data must be in a scientific state. She's a recognized expert in data classification and cleaning and transformation. Known as the classification guru, her blogs, books, talks have earned her over 43,000 followers on LinkedIn. We're discussing her 2026 book today, Optimizing Sales and Marketing Data. So come with me to Guildford, England, to speak with Susan Walsh. Susan Walsh, welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Susan, you wrote a book, your second book. Can you please tell me the name of the book?
I know I can't believe I did it again, but yeah, it's Optimizing Sales and Marketing Data, Strategies for Efficiency and Accuracy.
Okay, so efficiency and accuracy. Let's start with that. I suppose good old Mark Twain said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, and that there's a lot of ways that can lose people's trust in data. And if we're in sales or marketing, data is required by our bosses. Decisions are made based on data. The activities of our company, like sending out an invoice or understanding what the market needs, are all based on data. In your opinion, why is it so important that we work to clean data?
It's the window to your business, to your opportunities, to your customers, your clients, your success, your failure, your previous history. But we're sales and marketing people. We're not data people. We don't need that kind of stuff. But we're all data people now, right? We all need to know about
Yes,
this.
not an option.
Yeah.
Bad data will bring on bad decisions. There have been times where you have heard of and shared blunders that cost a company its reputation, sometimes even put its own existence in peril. Can
Yeah.
you give us some examples of that?
Absolutely. And I think these are the kind of hidden costs that I don't think we are always aware of. So the great one is an example of a coffee company where they sent out a promotion and told everyone they'd won and they hadn't won. And then there was a backlash on social media. And rather than just share stories, I actually want to offer my opinion on how I would have dealt with the situation.
Sure.
not only do I clean data, but I run a business, so I have to market my business too. So I have that dual perspective that's quite unusual. And they just tried to pretend it didn't happen, took away the offer and the prize, and just left everybody. And honestly, it wouldn't have cost them much to say, here's a can of drink, to
Yes.
say sorry, or here's a voucher. They just went, no, you can't have it. Sorry, it was a mistake. And they blamed it on their third party as well, which really drives me nuts because no matter how much of your business you outsource, you should always know what's going on. And your data will show you and tell you what's going on too. I outsource some stuff, but I still know exactly what I have an accountant, but I still know what's going on in my numbers and when the money's coming in and when it's going out and all that kind of stuff. I don't just let someone else manage that, and then otherwise I'd end up with a problem one day where someone would say we didn't get paid and I'd be like, what?
Yes.
That is a data error because somebody had input the wrong information into one of the systems, and then rather than picking one winner it went out to everybody that had signed up. That's still a data problem. It might not seem like the obvious kind of data problem, but it is. And ownership and responsibility is really important. But again, it's not always about what happens, it's about how you manage it too. So you should never really look at one row or one cell or one column. You need to look at all the data around it to give you a picture.
And the example you gave, which I think highlights an even more sinister aspect, is the Volkswagen with the emissions
Oh,
scandal.
yeah.
And I think what I take from that, you mentioned about context, how
Yeah.
data is there to answer questions that we have. But
Mm-hmm.
I think in addition to context, the process of handling data must be treated with respect. And if there are signs that anyone, marketers, sales, or their management has disdain for data or is just willfully blind to what the data is saying,
Yeah.
such as you've got a very dirty CO2 emitting engine in this diesel vehicle, that would call for some engineering to fix, not you masquerading with a software program that lies to an emission test.
Yeah.
So it's the process around the data that I think you argue so cogently for, to say it's a way of showing respect to data. Either data matters or it doesn't. And
But
I
it's
think we
being
can all agree it
ethical.
does.
Yeah. Yeah. And being ethical. And although that was the emissions scandal, I know so many people that have been asked to like fudge the numbers, make the numbers look better in their organization. How many times have we been asked to do that or been told to? And you think it's okay because my boss told me to, but actually, when something like the scandal comes to light, everybody's liable and responsible for it. I get it. Like, how hard is it to have to say no to a boss? Like, you're scared of your job, your promotions, future prospects. But if you go down that path, once you do it once, it gets easier, right? And then you do more and it snowballs and it becomes a bigger thing. And that's probably what happened with Volkswagen too. It's like it started as a small thing and
Yeah.
then people were like, we can't go back now. We're just going to have to keep going down this road.
Yeah. And it goes higher and higher in the organization until a C-level person goes, yes, that decision that just makes that one tiny division's numbers look a little better by telling a white lie, we as an entire company are going to take that on. And that's now how we're running things. We're
Yeah.
kind of just shirking all of our responsibilities and we're going to embrace some nonsensical practice.
And nobody's really thinking at this point, or seriously, like, what are the consequences if someone finds this out? It's almost like they thought they could get away with it. And then we go back to brand and reputation management. Like, how much did money was lost and wasted on PR companies and sales lost and
Right.
switching to other brands, and that kind of thing takes years to recover from and can be ruined overnight.
Yeah. Near the very beginning of the book, you say the data problems are people problems. And I
Yes, I
think
do.
we've successfully shown this right here. And I don't think we mean that people in and of themselves are malicious. Because I think the other thing that is true is that whenever you have systems which humans are inputting into, we're not perfect. And sometimes we just make mistakes. And data doesn't stay pristine all by itself. Can you tell me a little bit? You mentioned just a minute ago about hidden costs.
And this is something that I've I can tell you, I've almost never seen a business case being made inside of a company for being proactive with cleaning up their data.
Yeah,
I have seen some where a company, for example, doesn't know how much it's owed by its creditors,
yeah.
or it has some other major nasty surprise and it must do an audit. And those are very painful. But let's flip this around. We're looking for revenue. After all, we're in the sales and marketing side of the company. So those costs aren't really going to be things that get us out of a hole. Should we start thinking about investing, plowing costs into keeping our data clean for some upside?
Oh, there are so many upsides. And the reality is, I would say 9 out of 10 clients that I work with, there's been a problem and they've come to fix it rather than being proactive. Because the reality is that data is always someone else's responsibility, problem, department,
Mm,
right? We're not taking that out of our budget. Oh no, we're not going to pay for that. And it ends up not being anybody's responsibility, and then nobody's looking after it. But if you, and actually, I'm seeing this a lot more with the advent of more AI and Gen AI now. Sales and marketing are not a silo anymore. They're talking to procurement and finance too. So we've been doing some projects where we're pulling together finance data and sales and marketing data to see what sales and marketing hold that could be useful to finance and vice versa, because sales and marketing could be targeting this organization that they think is going to be the great next big whale, and they've got a
yeah.
really terrible credit rating. More of that is happening. And if you invest in cleaning your data, getting those foundations right, then the maintenance becomes super easy because you do it daily, weekly, monthly. It's like small parts that, mean it's not a huge chunky task that you have to do at the end of the year. And it's also really hard because it's very hard to prove the ROI until you've done it. One example, we cleaned a CRM system and deduplicated. There was like about 3 or 4 different sources of data from a retailer. Some was from the store, some was from MailChimp, some was from somewhere else. There were 2.1 million rows of data, and we cleaned and deduplicated that down to 1.2 million rows. Can you imagine if they had put that in a CRM uncleaned and how much they would be paying unnecessarily for all those
Yes.
redundant records?
Storage alone.
Yeah, and then what about the time wasted by your sales team targeting phoning the wrong people, or having half the contact notes on this record and half on this one? More
Yes.
wasted time. That split or loss of communication and notes could mean that 2 people are now contacting one person, or we just had a conversation and you've forgotten it. And that happened to me recently in the last year, where I'd spoken to a guy and said, don't call me back. And then he phoned me like we'd never spoken before, just like a couple of months later. And I was like,
The one that sent chills for me was when you said you could have a CRM and an online store, an e-commerce store, and your CRM is maybe for phone sales orders, and that someone could purchase once, but because you have duplicate records of the person, of the customer, they could fraudulently submit for a refund twice or more. You'd never catch it.
it happens in finance with invoices. There's 2 accounts. The invoice goes on to one, doesn't get paid, so someone puts it through again, goes on another account, and then gets paid twice. Rebates is a really great example in sales. If you're working with suppliers and customers and they're selling your products and they're getting a rebate, so either you could overpay or underpay, and then either way someone's not going to be happy about that. It can ruin relationships. It can damage your own business, your cash flow, your profitability, head
Yeah.
count. It's those little things that all add up to bigger problems.
Yeah, personalization. Marketers are sometimes they have, what do they say, their head in the clouds of saying, we're going to try this great thing called, we're going to gear up for some personalization. But in the examples you just gave, they're hurting themselves if they attempt. Because in your case, you were there twice. And
Yeah.
out of one time, they knew who you were. The other time, you haven't changed, but they have no idea who that is. And they think it's someone else. Even pulling back from that, segmentation. a basic
Yeah.
understanding. If I have 2.1 million records, segmentation, when I really should be looking at just over a million records, is way off.
And how long has that segmentation been in place? Is it still relevant? Do you need to review it? Do people know it? Like, segmentation is very much like classification on the procurement side. It's subjective. You can often have more than one right answer for segmentation. So it's about agreeing consistency and standards across your team and your board so that everything is being measured the same way. Because you don't have that visibility. I've had 2 different emails saying, "Hi, Susan," and then it's referenced a book title that isn't even my book. And I'm like, okay, this is not good.
You caught the roll beneath me and sent me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
If we all imagine, because we've all done it, you're in a spreadsheet and you simply drag that little copy
Mm-hmm.
across down one row and bang, all of a sudden your data is dirtier. And another one that you mentioned while we're on segmentation was how people will, despite, let's say, our own IT department or whoever our vendor is, trying to make life easy for us by giving us a drop down box. People are in a hurry.
So it was a drop down menu, and I think we've probably all seen the memes of like space planning where there's like a nice square with a tree and everyone's cut through the grass and now there's a worn out path because people won't go round the corner, they want the shortest route. And drop down menus are the same. Free text is just as dangerous, but so everybody was just clicking the first drop down menu. So there was like a massive amount of over reporting on alpacas or something like that. And that's where the data problems or people problems come in. It's not that people are the problem, it's that people are not being trained. People are not being told the impact of the data and what's wrong with it and what happens if it's not right. They're not being given proper documentation on how to set up a customer in a CRM or a supplier or any of that stuff. It's very rare. And so you lose that consistency. People are just doing it the best way they know how, which could be very different to the next person to the next person. And then you're trying to report on that and you can't find it.
And I'll add one to that that I think sales management have to take ownership of, and that is that inputting, which people are never given time for in their job. In the case of a CRM for a salesperson, that very data is being used to judge their candidacy for keeping their job.
Their performance,
So
they
let's
even
let's remember
commission.
for a minute the misuses of
Yeah,
this data. And if it really is, if it's truly important that the data needs to be right, then we've got to cut out some of this nonsense and give people the time. And we also have to cut them a break because, and I love how you put this out, there are so many things about our languages and our regions and our lives where there are subtle differences, which we have to acknowledge. If we don't standardize, we're going to end up with dirty data no matter what.
it's engagement with all the different departments, countries, people involved, and coming to consensus. Now, not everybody is going to get what they want, but it's about compromise and agreement and what's best for the business or for marketing or the campaign or whatever it is. I see this in the spend classification world all the time. One week we are classifying DHL for one client as a courier because that's what they're offering. And then the next week we're working for a manufacturer and it's warehousing and logistics and freight and it's a whole different kind of spend. One
Mm,
company, 2 very different classifications, but both in different contexts. So
yeah.
it's about agreeing that, and I can't remember if I shared in the book, but when we were building a global taxonomy for a food company, we had to agree on chips or fries, biscuits or cookies, because they're very different things in different areas of
There's
the world.
there's
You
there's
know,
a
it's
beautiful transatlantic problem right there, Chip.
yeah, it matters. It really does.
So you mentioned a word I love there, taxonomy. So
Mm-hmm.
take us through a little bit and the part of, as you said, forging consensus. This is not about whoever's got the highest job title that can
No.
dictate, we're going to call them chips. And you also point out some very elegant solutions. You mentioned a hierarchical taxonomy where you can have more than one level, which to me seems like a great way to solve the problem. It doesn't need to be when you say something, I have to say no. I can
Yeah.
come back and say, yes, meaning I'm good with your choice, and why don't we agree that both chips and fries are frozen potato product?
Or potato chips, you would call them, but we would call them fries. And one of the great examples is we didn't have in the meat category horse meat, but Asia was like, that is a huge part of our
Mm,
spend. We need that in the
wow.
taxonomy. And then my favorite is the pest control because we had rats, birds, that kind of thing. India was like, you need snakes and monkeys in there too.
And snakes.
Right? Yeah. So having a lot of input means that you get the broadest coverage and visibility for what you are trying to report on, analyze, who you're trying to target, all those kinds of things.
You gave the example of talking with, let's say, customer success about what types of customers they have. Now, that data is actually super useful to sales because they then know who to go after. But if you don't have a common taxonomy, you may have, think of a
Oh,
histogram, you may
yeah.
have one segment that would be the largest of them all, except you haven't used the same name to call them. So they get lost out in the edges. They're not the
Yeah.
mode, they're scattered. And it's just a problem of not asking the right questions. Now, when it comes down to actual names of corporations, and you even mention addresses and people's names, you go a step further by saying we should have master lists. Tell us about that.
Data isn't a freestanding time standstill kind of thing. And it moves, it updates. New data comes in every day, every month, every quarter. And you need to update that with the correct segmentation. And rather than do it manually, which yes, there's tech and there are tools out there, but a lot of people are still having to just kind of do this on the fly themselves. You don't want to be spending every month manually having to update that. So build a master list. Have the person's name and the postcode or the company name and then a segmentation or a category,
Yep.
and then just apply that. And I share just using XLOOKUPs how to do that in your data. So many people have the basics, and so I'm trying to give them something to work with that makes them better at their job and it makes it easier for them as well. Because if it's too much hard work and it's too much effort, it's one of those things that always falls to the bottom of your to-do list, right? It's never a priority. And so then you end up not having data for a year or visibility for a year because you've let it slip. And so it's about trying to make that practical and usable and building that into your routine so that it isn't such a chore and that you're not relying on IT or finance or data or customer success for or marketing for even other bits of marketing. You can do it, you can get on with it and you can manage that, and that's I'm trying to make it as accessible for as many people as possible.
To stitch it into how you do the everyday tasks,
Yeah.
not closing the doors. When we do this kind of validation as we go, you have a four-part framework that says what we should have when we know that we have properly done this. Tell us about that.
You mean the data coat? Like a
I
little
mean the coat.
jacket? Yeah,
Put
put
the
your
coat on.
coat on your data. So, first of all, it's got to be consistent. So, we've talked about consistency in segmentation, inputting customers. It could be even things like globally, are we all using the same date format or the same units of measure? Those kinds of things create all kinds of problems. So, have that
Yeah, right.
consistency. Yeah, we've all done it. We can't get this document to match, or we can't find this thing because the date's not right. Oh, wait, it's in a different format. Then
You
it's got
can't
to be
have 13 months in
organized.
a year.
Yeah, have that segmentation, have those industries, have whatever it is you need on your specific customer, client, company ready to go so that when you need to do a quick report, it's there and it's easy to find. Of course, it's got to be accurate too, but let's not confuse accuracy with perfect. So it's define what accurate is, what you need it accurate to be for whatever kind of area of data that you happen to be working in, and keep it consistent. And then once it's consistent, organized, and accurate, guess what? It becomes trust. And then you can report with confidence, you can target the right market with confidence, you can report to senior management. Even we were talking about sales earlier. If they've got They've probably got different numbers to finance. How often have you been in meetings when like people are arguing over different numbers? By standardizing it all, it really helps to get everybody on the same page and waste less time as well.
But just
There's one
admitting
more thing.
admitting that it's not normalized by itself. You
Yeah,
must proactively step in to do that.
absolutely.
So we covered consistent, organized, accurate,
Trustworthy.
trustworthy,
Yes.
and
But
is only possible if the three priors have been nailed.
yes, you can't have it otherwise. And it's not good enough to just put that coat on. You have to keep it on all year round. So you have to then maintain. And like I say to people, it doesn't have to be like a big mammoth chore like once a month or once a quarter. Sit with your coffee in the morning and do 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there, just tweaking little bits. And then it just doesn't become such a, what it is a chore for a lot of people. And there's not many people who enjoy it as much as I do.
But the spot checks are great. And again, we know that we're not going to hit 100%, but the one that resonated with me, when you have your morning coffee, grab product list, address list of cities or whatever it is, and do a pivot table and
Pivot
just
tables are,
see, do we
yes.
have, and sort them alpha and see whether or not you have, is it Newcastle on Tyne? Is it Newcastle in,
Carolina. Even actually, so recently I was looking at a state and it said CA, and I actually thought it was for Canada, but it was actually California. But pivot tables are massively underestimated. Yes, we could do some sexy charts and graphs, but sometimes all you need is a quick pivot table to visually see what's not right. And it might not just be that, it could be, say you were looking at companies or people's names and their segmentation or the industry. Flip it round. Look at it by industry and look for any names that stick out that shouldn't be in there. So, say in the manufacturing industry, you've got Accenture,
okay.
consulting firm. They shouldn't be segmented like that. And sometimes it's easier to see it that way. So, flip the data around, back to forward, fronts to sideways. Looking at it in different views really kind of starts to make things pop out that shouldn't be there.
We won't always be given data that is beautifully layered in discrete rows and columns.
That very
And
rare.
yeah, sadly, when you are in spreadsheets, maybe it is coming out of a CRM system and you have dropped a flat file and opened it in a spreadsheet. You highlight a couple of tools and formulas that I love. The trim function. So that's to make sure that we don't have spaces.
It's the hidden spaces. They're not always obvious. So sometimes it could be at the start of a name and you just don't notice it. And
Right.
then your lookups don't work because it's not, although it is the same visually, technically.
Concatenate.
Yes.
You
First name,
can
last name.
concatenate
You want the first name and last name together, which you may or may not want, but concatenate is great for that.
text to columns, which is, I suppose, the opposite.
Yeah.
Case. And
It's really hard. And depending on what it is, find what's right for you. But I find that having company names in uppercase, all capital letters, is the best way. But I find that for addresses, it's better to have it in proper case, sentence case, where, it's lower. But if you have a mix, it makes it very difficult to spot things that are not quite right because your eye's confused.
but the spreadsheet can come to the rescue for us there. And I'm sure a lot of people know about VLOOKUP, but tell us about XLOOKUP.
Yeah. And honestly, I was staunchly a VLOOKUP girl. I was like, I'm not switching. But XLOOKUP does have some great benefits. And if you are new to this, maybe start with a VLOOKUP. It's less
Yeah.
intimidating, right? You look up a column in one sheet, or it could be within the same sheet, or it could be a different file. And you're looking for the same information in another area to match on. And then you want to pull through that information. So let's say it's a customer ID, for example. So you've got a customer ID here, but no name. You've got a customer ID in this file and a name. So you want to pull that through. VLOOKUP is quite clunky. So it's because it's called vertical lookup. You look in the column and then it will search everything after that lookup column. So it always has to be to the right of
Yeah.
the column. XLOOKUP throws that rulebook out the window and goes, not a problem, hold my beer. I'm going to look anywhere and everywhere. And I can't tell you how much it revolutionized a project I was working on where there was information up here and then there was tables down here, and it was like you would have had to manually extract all that, and XLOOKUP could just pull all that information because it can look in all directions and anywhere. It's not so linear. But the best thing you can do is practice, and not just with test data, but on your own data, because I did the Excel courses when I was younger, and they went in one ear and out the other because it wasn't the data that I was working with. How to apply that to my data. Practice. Create a copy of that file. Go and do your worst. Break it. There's no heart. That's the best way to learn.
I think marketers are beautifully situated for this. You said we have to do this. We're all in data jobs now. And instead of seeing that as a chore, think of the possibilities. If we have a large client base and we have a new product that we want to sell to them, this upsell opportunity would be huge if we looked at the kinds of information that would tell us who needs it, and we compare that with known information in our client list, our CRM. The minute you want to put those together, to me, putting them into a spreadsheet to see whether or not the data is clean enough that you could actually join those two different data sources, you could have a multi-million pound opportunity on your hands, and all that stands in your way is answering the simple question, how well can they be joined?
Yeah.
And if your data is not clean, the answer is probably not at all.
Yeah.
If your data is clean, the answer is you're ready to go. That revenue opportunity is real and about to become your future.
And there's two kind of side benefits to this too. One is that's going to give you competitive advantage, right? You've got insights that nobody else is thinking about. But from a more selfish perspective, if you become the expert in your marketing data or your sales data or whatever data, you're the go-to person in that business, right? You are the person. That raises your profile within the organization. People who didn't know you before know who you are. That opens a lot of doors to other opportunities in the future, right? It's worth investing some time in getting to know your data and being that person. Because let's face it, there are a lot of layoffs and redundancies and a lot going on right now. The more you can do to make yourself invaluable to an organization, the stronger your position will be. And knowing your data and having clean data is definitely up there, I would say.
We said earlier about AI, and the generative AI cannot take the dirty data and come up with any useful insight. However, a person who knows how to make that data clean and feed it into a machine in a machine readable format, that person is now extremely valuable.
And the flip side is understanding and knowing how to interpret the output too, knowing what's right and what's wrong and what to look for. And again, that is, you have to be looking at your data on a regular basis to be able to know, oh, this person shouldn't be in this category, or this customer is not segmented, or why is this missing? All those little things really do add up.
One thing I would say coming out from the book is that intuitively, I found myself nodding all the time. And it was just comforting to know, okay, so I can do all those things. And if I just do them, then I'll reap the benefit instead of being overwhelmed.
I spend my life, and mostly I do work in CRMs and I do understand sales and marketing data, but to write a sales and marketing book when you're not a sales and marketing professional or qualified, this is giving you real hands-on tips on how you can improve your work life and, who knows, raise your profile in the organization.
Yeah, and for any people who do digital analytics, everything that Susan has said also applies to any of the channel and campaign information that you'll bring down from your ad platforms or from your Google Analytics. If you take care of those error-fraught data sources, you will then be able to bring the insights together from those as well. Yeah. Susan, if people want to find out about where to get the book or what you do and where they can get a hold of you, where would you send them?
I think the best place to find me is on LinkedIn, Susan Walsh, the Classification Guru. Theclassificationguru.com is my website. We've also built a company name normalization tool called Samification, so you can check that out too. But you can find all those routes through LinkedIn. That's my hangout.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Until next time, please get better insights into your marketing so that you can make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.